have to pick on Ari for a second. There we go. I thought it was really interesting that a network guy was so familiar with this idea of buying the cheapest impression in the last view that a session that a user had to get last view credit. That's interesting. He was very confident about that, wasn't he? I wanted to ask Ari what it's like being an agency guy now when you've been a network guy for so long. I mean, it seems to be a trend these days. You see a lot of ex-networks folks showing up in trading desks and DSPs in other buy-side systems, and I just think that's interesting. There's clearly there's a there. We should have a panel on that. Ex-network people that work on the buy-side now. All right, so hi guys. Thank you so much for joining me up here.
Morning.
I'm a principal analyst at Forrester. I'm kind of the resident buy-side digital ad technology wonk for Forrester. I'm really passionate about programmatic buying. I'm really passionate about data management and the rise of DMPs, and I'm super passionate and nerdy about advanced attribution and how needed it is in the ecosystem. But today we're here to talk about RTB and brand advertisers. So can you guys just introduce yourselves, please?
Hi, I'm Jeremy Lavisek. I'm the Vice President for Strategy and Business Operations at Varick Media Management. We're the agency trading desk for MDC Partners.
Hi, I'm Andy Chapman, leader of digital investment at Mindshare for North America.
I'm Michael Lambert. I'm Vice President and Group Director of Media at Digitas New York.
Are we like super unfunny? Like nobody's laughed at all morning, and it sort of stresses me out that you guys are so
I'd be a little nervous if they were laughing already at us.
I thought my Ari comment was pretty funny.
There you go. I just got our laugh.
But thank you. Good. Thank you.
Laugh at our introductions.
I know. Oh, Jeremy. All right, guys. Let's just start by talking a little bit about how RTB is evolving for kind of each of the groups with whom you work. I'm curious about brand adoption or not, say like in the last year. We can just go down the line. Jeremy?
Sure, I'll kick it off, see if we can get some laughs. At Varick, we've been around for about 5 years now, so we're been in the RTB space for a while, working with a number of technology partners, and I think some of the scuttlebutt in the industry is true. It wasn't necessarily a place for brands, perhaps in the beginning 5 years ago, but I would argue that's probably changed quite a bit. Certainly in the last, I would say, 12 to 18 months. Some reasons for that is that the supply available on exchanges, we're seeing at this point the most premium of premium publishers. So the Condé Nast of the world, the ESPNs, whoever, name your name brand. Very, very strong publishers making themselves available to be bought programmatically. And we're seeing clients adopt it simply for the efficiency, the performance, which are sort of perhaps DR words, but I think brands look for their own KPIs as well, and I think we're finding that a lot of them can achieve it in the RTB space.
So, Andy, is it certain kinds of brands? Like, are there certain categories that are leaning in more than others, would you say?
Well, excuse me, for us, actually, I don't necessarily see that it's certain kinds of brands. It's really all of our brands that are getting into the RTB space, regardless of KPI at this point. I think everybody's aware that the sort of early adopters were direct response advertisers typically. I would say, though, over the last couple of years, and certainly I think in the last year for us, we've seen a big increase in education, so a lot of time spent on our part, but also a lot of interest on our clients' side in understanding how to put this into the mix for more brand-oriented, KPIs, so up the funnel activities, and probably some of our larger, players in that area this last year and then into this year with significant growth are CPG. So, but across the board, all of our clients are looking to expand what they might have already been doing in sort of lower funnel activities into upper funnel brand-oriented metrics.
Is it like a marketer calls you up and says, my planning team sent me a post from Ad Exchanger and it had acronyms that I don't understand?
That's funny. I actually think that it's a combination, certainly, of us, we, the agency, driving this, because for sure we see it, we believe in it, we're true believers, and we want to make sure that our clients are aware of what the opportunities are and how it could fit for them. But there's no doubt that they're getting other external pressures and they're hearing about this from other folks in their own organizations, from maybe even the CEO down, and certainly CMOs for sure. And let's face it, this is a very active industry. So there are a number of ad tech companies that are out there that call on our clients, that have relationships with clients, and lots of different conversations going on. So, we have to figure out as an agency a way to kind of manage the conversations, not to stop them, because we would never do that, and that's not the point.
Good luck.
Yeah, it would never work, and it's not the point. It's really how do you collect all those different discussions and start to educate and put things in context for how it can work for their businesses.
So, Michael, I know you're very oriented toward direct response, and I'm sure what you're doing is incredibly savvy. We're going to talk about that later. But for Digitas, what's happening, would you say?
Sorry. I think that at Digitas, I think over the past year, it really isn't how the space has evolved for brands or direct advertisers specifically, because it's totally different for direct response advertisers, and the brands are doing totally different things than they did last year. I think at the beginning, we all know, like Andy said, it was the upsell from the ad networks. And I think now what's happening in direct response and the brands is they're both looking for the same primary goals, which is audience, efficiency, and scale. How they go about that is a little bit different. What we're seeing is that the direct response component of RTB has changed and become much more audience identification focused, very technology focused, very trying to create a predictive engine moving forward. While the brands have now said, we're always going to have our premium content buys, we're always going to have our sponsorship buys, we're always going to have our sort of ad network mid-funnel buys, but they're actually making RTB part of their planning cycle, and it's just considered another spoke within the cycle. And I think over the past year, that has been a massive shift for the brands getting more involved, and the direct response clients looking at it differently than just an extension of what they used to do with ad networks in the past.
Well, do you think that they actually get this is what distinguishes an ad network partner from this is what my agency trading desk can do for me, versus what I need to go direct to a publisher for? Do you think they get that?
I think it's a challenge, and I know at Varick we spend a lot of time. Big initiative for this year is even just marketing and more education. The more we reach out into the holding company network and working with different agencies, there's a huge scale of awareness and knowledge around this stuff. So there are lots of people who are absolutely still buying networks. That still exists. Often those people are just playing price games, trying to get the lowest possible price they can, get leverage. Can't blame them for that. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of unique value brought by trading desk groups and RTB specialists that we're trying to make that case a lot more strongly with a lot of our clients.
Yeah, that's the issue, right? Is the understanding, I think.
Right.
Yeah. All right, sorry, I have to refer to my phone, which has questions on it, because I didn't memorize them. Sometimes I memorize them. Okay. One of the things that we were talking about, guys, in preparation for this was this question of measurement and how the RTB ecosystem either better or less well lends itself to brand measurement and optimization. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think it's getting better as it relates to brand-oriented measurement. I still think, though, if you're looking at kind of straight-on technology solutions and DSPs, I don't know that they're sort of currently built for that kind of advertising or those kinds of KPIs specifically. But I think there are increasingly companies in the ecosystem popping up and also evolving. Research companies and things like that are enabling us to kind of in a real time do kind of 1 or 2 question survey type of stuff that allows us to kind of filter for further segmentation, get a read on whether we're in the right kind of fishing in the right pools and things like that. So we're starting to come up with ways to kind of patch things together with APIs and other things to enable that. So yes, I think the ecosystem is providing that. There is no sort of maybe one solution or one kind of destination that the DSP kind of started with that enables that naturally. I think that's the human part of this that comes in, where we as strategists at the agency and our research and analytics folks say, here's what we need to measure, here's what the KPIs are. Here's what we need to measure. How do we make that work? How do we stitch the technology together so that we can make this work?
Well, I just wonder, I mean, are brands comfortable with this idea of kind of real-time reporting and then real-time optimization on brand, rather than, we create a survey that we all spend a lot of time thinking about, and it's got 25 questions, and we do pre-post. Do they get it? I'm totally picking on brands. I don't mean to. I really want to know.
Well, I think what's helping all this is the way the marketplace is being structured. So I think the brand advertisers, for example, are getting a lot more comfortable with what's happening in real time around private exchanges. So if they are able to move away from the, I don't know where my media is running, this is just, the ComScore 5,000 or even the ComScore 1,000, they feel, from what I hear, especially with my client at American Express, they feel comfortable with private exchanges because they know exactly where they're running, it's totally transparent, it's a portion of their buy that makes strategic sense, and for them, it is all about inventory. I'm sure you'll get into this later, but I think the bigger question about making people feel comfortable with RTB always comes back to inventory and how the publishers are making strategic decisions to monetize their inventory. They're obviously going to sell most of their premium sponsorships first, direct. Then they're going to go down to the networks, and then eventually they're going to go into the exchanges. So I think the monetization model for RTB is very dependent on what inventory the publishers decide to put in the marketplace, which as it becomes a higher pool of more premium inventory, not necessarily just private exchanges, that the more significant brand advertisers, less so the direct response advertisers, will feel much more comfortable moving forward from an inventory quality point of view.
Yeah, but here's my question. So I think that conceptually we all kind of get what private exchange means, and I think we theoretically kind of get why it seems like a cool thing for publishers and for brand advertisers. But I mean, at least at Forrester, I haven't been able to figure out how much there is really there yet. I mean, it doesn't actually seem like there's that much. And I've started talking to big premium publishers, and I'm sure there are tons of exceptions. But in some cases, they say, well, we want to do it, but the demand's not really there yet. So it's just not returning any, there's no dividends being paid by this model for us. And so tell me, really, what are you guys doing with private exchange? Is it real?
Yeah. It's. I think I've seen some stuff written about this recently. It seems to be a little bit of a hot topic. Maybe it's not hot, maybe it's warm, but and maybe that's the issue. Is there's lots of conversations. We're having lots of conversations with partners that we currently do mostly handcrafted, traditional IOs, et cetera. And the idea of it is certainly attractive, and I think it's attractive for them. I think publishers absolutely need to figure out a way that's safe for them, that protects their revenue stream and keeps their CPMs up. We kind of understand what their motivation is. Our motivation certainly is just getting access to really quality audiences and at a fair price, at a market price. I think what the issue has been that we've seen so far is there's still a gap between the trepidation on the publisher side and the rules that they want to set up around that would govern how that sort of a arrangement would work, that maybe we aren't meeting at the buy side yet in terms of it being something that we're going to ever do at scale at the current sort of understandings that we have. So whether it's kind of floors that are still probably too high relative to what other things that we think we can buy or other places we can buy those audiences. And we'll continue to do premium stuff with those partners. We haven't stopped doing that, but I think there's that element of automation that in general is a theme that we should be thinking about with all of our partners, is how to make our day-to-day interactions smoother and take out some of the friction from that. Whether it's RTB or not, there's probably an automation story there to be figured out.
I would say for us, private exchanges have been a little limited, and I think there's a few reasons for that. In some cases, publishers who kind of got into the RTB game, having pressure put on their CPM, so they look to private exchanges as a solution there. But if it's the same inventory that is potentially going to be on the exchange anyway, it's hard as a buyer to sort of justify more cost on that, right? So why pay more for that? I think the area that publishers could get more traction in that stuff is really looking, I think, let me back up for a minute. I think the way we view the world at Varick is that there's going to be two very distinct paths going on here. There's a scale, programmatic, automated side that's going to be about reach, and there's going to be a very high-touch, custom side where brands and publishers are going to work together to create really unique experiences. And I think as a trading desk, we've done a lot in the scale and reach side, and we want to get more into that unique high-touch experience. And we're looking for publishers to work with us on those type of projects. So if you're going to take something that was maybe in that exchange bucket anyway, and maybe try and call it a private exchange, or bump the CPM up a little bit, it's hard to know if that's really going to be successful.
That kind of makes me want to ask, where does the trading desk stop and the agency start? I mean, it's kind of, I definitely see, and as you were saying that, I was thinking about, we had this graphic in this paper that we wrote that was like, the future will be, programmatic over here and custom high touch over here. And you're sort of talking about wanting to play in both. And so I'm skipping to the end here, but what is the role of agencies in this world? How is that evolving? You're all agency guys. How are you, but you have very different positions. How are you adapting?
Yeah, I want to hear how these guys answer it, actually.
How are you adapting? How is your agency adapting? And who's going to handle what?
Well, I think, as the space evolves, the agency model has to evolve with it. And I'm sure it's the same at Mindshare at Digitas. With digital being at the core of everything we do, we are trying to figure out the best way to automate both what the agency teams do and what the desks team do. And what I think it is there's so much going on that I think that there are very distinct different tasks for each group to work on. For example, I think that there's a tremendous amount, one thing we haven't talked about yet, especially for brand advertisers, and I'll get back to the agency thing. I think one of the other things that's been very interesting about RTB as it relates to brands is the ability to use it as a CRM tool. You can place publisher pixels on all your login pages for whatever your customers are logging into. And then the brands then have the ability to reach their known customers in an RTB environment. That's not a direct response tool, but it's an efficient, effective, cost-effective way to reach your known customers in environments that are cost-efficient, and you're not looking to necessarily drive an action, you're just looking to further engage with them. So I think that's important for the brands too. Yeah. Getting back to the agency model, I think what we're trying to figure out is what to take advantage of first. We have people at the trading desk that spend a tremendous amount of time looking at the different technology partners. We work very closely with them. My planning and buying team works very closely with the desk to try and figure out, given a client's goals, what actually is the best product for them to do. Is it DSP X, Y, and Z? What is the creative decisioning tool that we're going to use? What are the best third-party data partners to use? I think it has to be a very cohesive working relationship between the agency and the desk, because it goes far beyond just the planning and buying of media. I think the days of just buying media are obviously over. We're looking now to buy individual audiences at scale.
And what about the brand in all of this? How involved is the end advertiser in those kind of strategic discussions that happen between trading desk and agency team? I think traditionally the model has been that the trading desks service the agencies, right? And they're sort of almost back office. And I worry that actually holds everybody back a little bit, right, from kind of better knowledge sharing. So I'm curious, are you finding brands wanting more kind of strategic involvement in those conversations?
It runs the gamut. I guess that wouldn't be surprising to hear that answer. I mean, certain clients who are much more lean forward, right? Yep. And who love this stuff and actually may be staffed that way, right? They've got somebody who's, head of, could be CRM, could be data, who wants to be more involved in how we use kind of audience buying and trading desks and such. And some other clients who just want to understand it conceptually, understand where it fits into their mix and their toolbox, and obviously want to see what the outcomes are and how it's actually, is it actually performing and being additive to what we're currently doing, versus wanting to see how the sausage is made or all the intricacies that happen sort of in the back office. So you do see those gamuts, but I think it's still a constant conversation about wanting to understand its right sort of mix at this current time in their overall sort of plans and objectives and strategies moving forward.
You're kind of making me think. I want to ask you guys, can you describe, you don't have to name the brand, but can you kind of give your favorite example of a brand advertiser that's working in the kind of RTB world? Like just in broad strokes and why it's cool.
Well, I'm happy to, and it's not a secret. I mean, American Express.
Yours is pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, it's public knowledge. It's not a secret of who the top 10 RTB spenders are. I think, Forrester publishes it, eMarketer publish it. It's constant, and I think the reason why American Express believes in it from the brand and direct response point of view is because what I talked about earlier. It's meeting the goals of both the direct response advertisers. Our focus is obviously to work in a direct response environment where RTB is working great for us up to a limit, where we are able to take advantage of, in many cases, flexible pricing and get away from just the flat CPM pricing and looking at, like I said, at creating unique cookie-based purchase decisions. That's important. And for the brand, like I said before, they're getting more comfortable because they're starting to see ways where they're able to insert in the RTB strategy in a way that makes them feel comfortable, makes the brand feel comfortable, and that's why the brand is actually at American Express more than comfortable in the RTB environment because they know that they can control it. And whether it's the private exchange component or even, like I said, the card member or audience data, people, I think, are moving away from trying to understand the black box special sauce of it all and really getting involved in how do we take advantage of these technologies? What can we do to help create a predictive model for whatever our individual brand's goals are? And I think as the space gets more technologically advanced, it will move much more towards that and not trying to poke holes into, is this better than the old way of doing things? Because I think, if we're honest, it is better. I mean, I think it's significantly better. It's a much more advanced, complicated process, and there's no reason why the space should, go backwards. It should go forwards, and I think it's doing an excellent job of doing that, and I think that's why you see big blue-chip brands getting involved in RTB spend at the levels that you saw published a couple of weeks ago. It's American Express, it's Delta, it's the CPG companies. They're not doing it because it isn't working, and they're not doing it because it's scaring them. The CMO is saying, where the hell are my ads running? Everybody's getting more comfortable with the process and the space and what we're doing.
I'd also just add, like broadly, our clients really expect us to be figuring out these kinds of spaces, using technology to their advantage, because they also know how much pressure they're under in their own organizations to control costs. Hence, they need to control costs in marketing, and the agencies feel that probably more than anybody. And part of that is, while they feel for us in that respect, it's a cold, hard world, and it's kind of like, help yourselves, guys, and you've got to use technology to your advantage. And so where we can use that to make things simpler and to do things with less friction, and over time, if it takes less people to do some of those non-strategic things like executing an I/O and that type of stuff, then that's a good thing. I'd rather have those brains being put towards strategy and high-value tasks. So all of this stuff, goes towards the drumbeat that moves on, which is we've got to use technology to our advantage and be less reliant on some of the lower value tasks that take up a lot of our team's time.
Yeah, and I would just say, I mean, your original question on sort of a case study, we have, some large brands, some financial services. That's okay.
God, Andy.
I got off topic.
Financial services advertisers. Really what we're pushing for as much as possible is a full funnel approach. So can we help you acquire people? Can we help you raise awareness? Can we help things like consideration? And I think more and more the RTB space is offering tools for that. You think about things like video. You think we mentioned surveys earlier. Another thing that we do at Varick is, we're building our own insights platform. So being able to say, listen, you've run this campaign, we have all these data points for you. Can we have one of our analysts or some of our human capital, because the people don't go away in this, extract insights from that? So, gee, there seems to be this pocket of activity happening in a certain geography at a certain time of day. What does that mean? Let's go deeper on that, and let's figure something out. And those are the type of things. I think we're at early phases for that, but we're trying to get out ahead of those things. Those are the kind of things that you can bring back to a brand as a real insight. So maybe that impacts your media strategy, your creative strategy, any number of areas for the brand's program.
Michael, go ahead.
One of the things I think, this has been a very positive conversation about the space, and I think it's important, but I think it's also important to at least talk about some of the challenges that we have
Do it,
with
please.
RTB. From a direct...
I thought that was Joanna's job.
I'm waiting. Well, I'm just doing it now because I know she's going to ask me in 5 minutes. From a direct response point of view, one of the things that we're seeing back at Digitas is that because the cookie data is becoming so rich and so many brands are in theory bidding on the same unique type of information, we're seeing actual real-world pricing in the RTB space that is exceeding fixed CPM, ad network, or direct publisher buys. And then we have to figure out, is the incremental cost of that data overlay or the incremental cost of bidding against brand X, an airline is looking for a frequent executive traveler, American Express is looking for a frequent executive traveler. How does the incremental cost and where does scale come from at the cost that you used to be able to really control? And that's one of the challenges that we face.
I'm so glad you said that, actually, because I was thinking about how, well, one of my worries is that, Andy, you use the word efficiency, and efficiency can be a good thing, and efficiency can also be a bad thing, in as much as, is efficiency about cheapness for some of these brands? And I don't want the answer to be yes,
No.
but I think, when you're talking about GRP, which is just about reach and frequency, cheapness seems to matter more, and that's kind of lame.
There's no doubt that I think we would all be kidding ourselves if we said that pricing hasn't been one of the attractive things about this for everybody, at least on the buy side. That would be silly. We'd be kidding ourselves. It absolutely is not the only thing, and it's an equation. It's price plus performance. If you want to call that value or whatever you want to call that, better effectiveness. There's so much more that even if everything was priced at exactly what we could buy it for, sort of on a one-off hand-to-hand method, there should be, if we're doing it right, a lot more learning that comes out of this, a lot more targetability to this, which should lead to better results and responses depending on what those KPIs are that you're measuring. If I can also do that while reducing my costs or scaling this to a degree that that makes the thing more efficient for me at the end of the day, with my math being price plus the performance is some cost per whatever I back into, then that's a win. And that's actually what we're really focused on doing. Price is an important part of the equation, but it's not the only one.
Okay, and again, you say that as a sort of smart, savvy agency person. You're finding that you have smart, savvy brands that really fundamentally get that, and they're not just saying, I think we can get it cheaper this way. And again, I'm not knocking getting it cheaper. I just want them to think bigger.
I think our brands, the people that we work with every day, understand that. There may be people in their organizations that don't understand that and actually have processes that aren't sensitive enough to pick that piece of it up, which, procurement, that may still be looking at things in the old world of just pure price. How much did you save me? Percent savings or CPM, when then obviously the more we spend in this area that's not governed simply by a cost, per my other comment, it's hard to reconcile that. When we go through, new business pitches or, annual reviews and things like that, there's clearly been realization over the last couple of years that part of it is broken, and it's becoming starker the more we spend in that area and the more important it is to us as a business.
Michael, were you going to say something?
Well, I'm always talking about cheap based on some of the work we do in direct response, but I think that cheap is, every brand defines cheap. If you're a brand advertiser and you're used to paying extreme premium CPMs, $30, $40, $50, and you can structure a private exchange deal where you get X number of impressions guaranteed per month at $15, that's not cheap. That's just the choice between going to a very fancy restaurant and going to a not so fancy restaurant. For the direct response point of view, if the old days of paying, $2 for a channel at an ad network, if I have the ability to retarget to someone that I know has expressed interest in a given brand, or just reach them from a prospecting point of view, and I now have the ability, for example, to retarget someone in an environment where the market says that impression's only worth a nickel, that's not cheap. That's just what the market will bear for that impression at that given time. So to me, it's not cheap. It's taking advantage of the technology that says X impression is worth X to Andy's brands,
Yeah.
Andy's clients, and it's worth something different to me, and he's more than welcome to pass on that bid, and I'm more than willing to pick it up if it backs into my metrics. So cheap is just, whatever the publishers need to monetize their inventory, and cheap is whatever the brands decide it's worth paying based on what their KPIs are. So cheap is, it's more about cost than
I think the key word you said there is market, right? I mean, that's what RTB's vision is, and I think that's what it's becoming, is this really inefficient economic market where people are paying for things that they want at a value that they want to pay. And then on the sell side, well, gee, I mean, you mentioned earlier competition for cookies. To me, that would be a great news if you're a publisher, right? It's like, well, gee, there's actually people who really want this audience. Maybe I should see if there's a way to attract more of them or develop content for them and sell more.
And that's the big issue in attribution, right? Because ultimately, when we look at ROI, if we have to pay twice as much for stuff, initially we think, well, that's not good. You're not getting twice as much. You're paying twice as much. But I think eventually when you start looking at things like multi-touch attribution and cross-channel, how do you value paying twice as much for something? Maybe it is more than worth it, and that 7 transactions that cost twice as much are better than 10 transactions that cost half as much. That there has to be a back-end model to justify all these different costs.
Amen. Did
You're
everybody
good at
write that
math.
down?
I like
That's probably
math.
the most important thing we could say up here is about understanding value, the sort of ways that different
Math.
elements influence. Yeah. I want to ask one more question, and then we probably have to ask if the audience has questions. I'm curious about the DSP space. Do you feel like the DSPs are you touched on this, Andy, briefly, are well suited to the needs of brand advertisers, or are they just really super great DR machines?
Well, I guess I reiterate kind of what I said, which is, in my experience currently, I think they in and of themselves aren't necessarily built for maybe some of the brand metrics and things that we need to measure broadly at that sort of area of the funnel. But I would expect that you're going to see there's always going to be consolidation in this marketplace. So I wouldn't be surprised if either they're acquired or they add on smaller bits of technology to enable that, because I think everybody understands that that's where the dollars are right now. If you're looking to grow, probably in general, there's probably more money spent against branding KPIs broadly in this entire industry. So there's money locked up that isn't being spent maybe as in any kind of drove that there could be. So if that's part of a business model for the DSPs, I wouldn't be surprised. And so how do they make their product suite more attractive to advertisers who are looking to do certain things and measure certain things? So I would expect that's probably something you're going to see in the marketplace.
Like imminently, I would think. I mean, certainly they're already doing it, but
yeah, they
I
are.
expect more and more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Michael, did you want to say
Well, I
something?
mean, we've worked with almost all the DSPs, and we have a pretty good handle on what they're all doing. I think some of them do stuff very well, and some of them do stuff not so well. And I think it's from both a tactical level and from a product level, all the algorithms are built differently on how they actually bid and buy media. Some are built on propensity to convert. Some are based on, super retargeting. I think what you're seeing is the DSPs are recognizing that they have some challenges in bringing in more dollars, whether it's from a quality of inventory point of view, from a viewability point of view, from an attribution point of view. And I think the DSPs are trying to expand their product suite and expand their inventory gathering capabilities to try and get ahead. I mean, that's why you see the DSPs creating video inventory, because they want to go after the video networks, they want to go after the premium buyers. And I think if you're a brand or a DR advertiser, I mean, I think it's lovely if you want the 300 by 250 box and you want to own it and it's a sponsorship, but what about the stuff that's right below it? How much is that worth? What about the stuff that's over here? I think it's beholden upon the DSPs to move more. Right now, I think they're only focused on creating an algorithm that forecasts an action. And I think they need to move towards looking at a suite of services and not just trying to create sort of a propensity to convert model and a retargeting model, and get more into prospecting and audience identification and letting what they're learning from their conversion data influence what they're doing on the prospecting end. Because if we're honest, retargeting is not really as strategic as certain people would like to say that it is. Prospecting is obviously a lot harder than retargeting. So if they can find better ways to have the retarget engine inform the prospecting engine and not the other way around, they would probably see more dollars flowing in.
I like that. Jeremy, final thoughts, and then I'm sure we have to take questions.
I basically agree with what we said. I do think openly DSPs tend to be more geared towards DR. I'll throw another acronym in there just because we always have to have our acronyms.
Do it.
But maybe a DMP type platform, potentially managing data, looking for insights, mining data, might be a better way to start approaching brands. So instead of just, hey, how many clicks can you drive on a Tuesday? What kind of patterns are you seeing over a long period of time in the data? What can you extract from that, and how can you buy against that as a brand?
I wish we had like another hour, because I really wanted to talk about that, but we don't have time. This question of like, does the DMP become the intelligence engine and the buying platform just become the execution engine? Ooh, we don't have time for that. Steve?
Questions?
Really? Oh, there's one.
Hi, Howie Schwartz with Human Demand. So we didn't talk about mobile at all today. So how does this play into mobile?
Ew.
Sorry.
So yesterday I wrote my New Year's resolutions publicly so that people could keep after me. And one of my New Year's resolutions was to understand mobile so that I could stop just picking on it indiscriminately, and actually pick on it when appropriate and champion it when appropriate. Mobile's, man, what a mess. I mean, the ad experience is mostly terrible. I'm trying to figure. Well, I mean, at Forrester we're trying to figure it out right now. But I'll shut up really quickly. You guys?
It's I agree with much of what you said. Yes, that was exactly it. I would groan a little bit longer though. No, it's a huge opportunity. I think everybody's sort of I think we're all kind of fumbling around in the dark, kind of figuring out how to make this work. There's a ton of inventory. So purely from a buyer's perspective, we're not taking anywhere near advantage of what's out there. And believe me, there's as a result of all that inventory out there, the pricing is pretty good as a buyer. But as you say, there's two things. One, I think clients and we still need to do a better job of putting mobile strategy up front and built into the overall strategy. I think we still aren't there, and mobilizing assets for clients is another major issue. Third is the user experience on mobile and advertising experience currently, which is just the website experience pasted on a really small screen.
Well, I mean, from our point of view, real quickly, we think of mobile not just about the phone at Digitas, but also about the tablet and all the other devices. And we're actually trying to figure out, and we worked with a very large portal, to try and help us look at how changing consumption habits should affect what we do, and not getting hijacked by the limitations of tracking some of the mobile technologies. But our portal partner helped us understand that the value of serving just 10 display impressions is not as valuable as serving 5 display impressions and 5 mobile impressions. That you need to take advantage of shifting consumption habits, and if the metrics aren't there, that's not a reason not to do it.
Can I call you for this paper I'm writing about targeting audiences across channels?
Of course you can, Joanna.
Thank you, Michael.
You'll call anyway.
That's true. I will. Joe, did you have a question?
We used to work in the same place,
Question,
so I'm not
but
making
what
fun.
also, I just want to follow up on that. I mean, isn't the real problem that you don't have the metrics? I mean, how do you do audience buying when you can't identify who the audience is?
Exactly.
Yeah, I would say in mobile, I was going to say users are there, advertisers are not yet. 2 quick reasons, I think, just to keep it short: creative units, as you mentioned, and data, as you mentioned. So that's the headline.
Well, and there actually are ways to technologically track people from the laptop environment to the device tab, as long as they're within a login environment. So we are able to track certain things with certain publishers, as well as track
it's very
certain
limited,
retargeting.
right?
It's limited, but like I said, I don't think that's an excuse to not do it right now. Especially if you look at small business owners, the small business owner is not running around the airport with his laptop anymore. He's running around the airport with his or her tablet. And to wait for optimal measurement to occur isn't utopia.
Yeah, we got to
And
try, right?
Agreed. Yeah, it may not be as smart and sophisticated as we're doing display right now, but I think we've got to be doing more than we are, and work really hard at getting it smart and sophisticated.
So my question, just real quickly, is I always like the debate between the funnel and performance versus brand. My question for you is, do you see it shifting more towards performance, lower funnel, because the metrics and the back-end data is so easily built into the systems and it's harder for you to, so just a question, do you see the tide shifting?
I don't see it shifting that way. I think it started there and it's shifting the other way.
In mobile specifically, Joe, or overall? Overall.
Yeah, I was answering as overall. Yeah.
I'd agree. Overall, I think you're seeing a lot more interest from brands, like really big ones, really big, savvy ones. This idea of audience, and being more audience-centric, this is something brands really, really understand, and finally they can do something about it. It's not just theory, I think it's really happening. I think are we out of time? Wrap it up, says Steve. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.